Welcome back to another episode of Leaders Unplugged. Today, our guest is Richard Herron. Richard has been in the management and business industry for more than 35 years. He is a successful businessman running many companies, one of those being Crawl Pros. Crawl Pros is a company for insulation removal and cleanup, air sealing, insulation installation, and home energy assessments, while using advanced technology to achieve people's energy goals. If you want to learn more about Crawl Pros, there will be a link to their website in the description. With all that being said, enjoy the interview. Our first question for you is, what led you to getting your first management position?
So I've been in ownership or management since I was 19. So I opened my first business, which was called Scuba Doo. Funny name, I know. We, in Long Beach, California, we did yacht hull cleaning under ships. So, all these from Dana Point all the way up to Malibu, you have all these ships and all these harbors, and they just sit there. People very rarely take them out. Well, they have to be every couple of years because barnacles will grow on the bottom and they have to be pulled out and dry docked and cleaned. Very expensive. But we could come in on a monthly basis and clean the hulls, scuba dive underneath them, clean the hulls. And they wouldn't have to do that very often. It would save them a ton of money. So we just charged per square foot. And we did that. And it was really, really good. We would go out on weekends and market ourselves to people on their boats and introduce ourselves and then get the work. But I had a business partner, and he was from Brazil, and I got married at 21. And I went to my wedding and got married and went on my honeymoon. When I came back, my partner had moved back to Brazil, had sold all the equipment, taken all the money out of the bank, and I was basically unemployed at that point. So I did what you had to do back in those days, and I had to stand in line at the unemployment office to try to get a job. And we didn't have the internet, so you had little cards. I had to fill out resumes and applications, and I had to go turn those in person. I didn't get to press a button and send a resume. And so I got a job at Smith's Food and Drug. Smith's Food and Drug was a grocery store chain that had been in California, had pulled out, was very successful in Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and now they were coming back. And it's an interesting story. I showed up for an open interview. There was about 750 people waiting to be interviewed. Okay. This was not a good time in America's history as far as the economy was not doing well, jobs were hard to come by. I was probably one of two people out of those 750 people that was wearing a suit. So I was wearing a full wool suit. Everybody else was just casually dressed. So I'm standing in line for, I don't know, I think from the time I got there to the time I got an interview was about 6 hours that I stood in line. It dumped buckets of rain, just dumped it on me. So I'm in this wool suit, I'm just drenched. And they're just, the first interview is like 4 minutes. They're just putting you through like cattle, okay? So I sit down and the lady's not even looking at me. She's looking down at her desk. She's filling stuff out. She asked me, what's your name? Oh, Richard Herron. Okay, do you have any experience in the grifting? No, I don't. And then she looks up and she goes, were you standing out in the rain in that suit? I said, yes, ma'am, I was. She goes, why didn't you go home? So out of those 700 people, probably about 3 of them just left when it started raining. I said, because I need a job. And she went, next, you're going to the next interview. She just passed me forward because I did that. So I get the job, and the store's being constructed. It's not open yet. And I'm showing up for orientation with everybody else, so we're doing our orientation. And in the middle of orientation, I got to know this guy, just met him the first day. I was talking to him. We ate lunch together. So I got to know the guy. And so they say, hey, we need 2 volunteers to clean all the dust off of all the shelves in the huge store. It's like a Fred Meyer. And nobody raised their hand. So I shot my hand up. And the reason why is I was broke. I needed money. I shot my hand up. Well, I said, but they needed 2. So I said, hey man, you're gonna do this with me. And I grabbed his hand, I lifted his hand up. He was a little bit upset with me. Later on, he was okay. So I'm doing that now. I'm cleaning the shelves, and I had been hired for their pizza department. Okay, so big store, it had all these sub-stores in it, and I had had experience in a pizza restaurant. So I was in charge of the pizza. And at the time I was making $6.35. Okay? I didn't know how we were going to financially make it on that. My wife was going to college, but I did it. I needed a job. So it's like the fourth day I'm there cleaning, and I had met the guy who was the pizza manager. So he's over there talking to two guys, and they get in an argument. One of them was the general manager of the store, but I didn't know who the other guy was. Well, it turned out that other guy was Richie Smith, the owner of the company. Him and his brother owned the company. So Richie Smith fired him right on the spot. Didn't like the guy, so he fired him. So him and the general manager, his name was Wes, are talking. Wes points to me and says, Richard, come here. And I walk over there, and they say, Richard, you worked at a pizza restaurant before, didn't you? You're in this department? I said, yeah. He goes, what'd you do before that? I said, well, I own my own business. They go, would you like to be the manager of the pizzeria? I said, absolutely. I'll do a phenomenal job for you. Well, I went from making $6.35 to $12.50 my fourth day on the job.
Oh my goodness, that's...
But would I have had that opportunity if I wouldn't have volunteered to clean?
Right.
Okay. Most people never ever achieve what they want to achieve because they don't put themselves in a position to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. And as a side note, you know what the number one thing that keeps you away from opportunity? Debt.
I've heard that one before, that's for sure. Yeah.
Right.
That's, I think, yeah, staying out of debt, even for me in college and stuff, I think that's what I've been focusing on a lot. So that definitely, yeah, that's...
So what if you had a job, most people spend what they make, and they spend more than what they make. They carry a balance on their credit cards. So let's say you have a job that's paying you $50,000, and you're spending that $50,000, you spend a little more than you're supposed to. And then you get a job opportunity that's only going to pay you $40,000 to start, but can lead you into a position of $100,000. Would you be able to take that?
That's a good question.
It'd be really hard because you would be behind on your bills right away.
Right.
So most people can't take the step backwards to move forward. And I'm going to tell you guys with all certainty, the majority of the opportunities you're going to have in your life, you have to take a step backwards to move forward. But let's say you were making $50,000 a month, but you learned how to live on 20. And you get a job opportunity for 40. Can you take that? Absolutely, because it's not going to screw you up. So me and my wife, our whole life, we always made sure we lived below our means. And to this day, I still live below my means. I never want to exceed my means because I never want to put myself in a position to not be able to take advantage of opportunities. So the pizzeria wasn't working out. They decided to close it down. One thing that I did as a worker, and I think this is really important, this is one of two lessons I learned from my father. I didn't learn a lot from my dad as far as business is concerned. But he said, make sure that you know everything that you can possibly know about the company you work for and the job that you do, so that you'll be the last person there when it closes down. So I was working the pizzeria, which was slow, and I had the service deli on the left of me, I had the bakery on the right. So I was over there making pies, making bread. I was over cutting up ham, frying chicken, okay? Then in front of us, we had a juice bar, and so I would go, it had to be ice, and the produce department took care of that. So I went there and I threw ice in it. I rearranged the juices. I restocked it so the produce guys didn't have to go over and do that. I went over to the bread racks, which were in front of me, and that was the grocery department. And I recycled the bread to pull the rack out of the back and filled it up, and I did all that. Nobody asked me to do it. I just did it. So when they were going to shut down the pizzeria, every manager in every department wanted me to work for them. Okay? They were all fighting over me because they could see what kind of worker I was. So when the time came, the best one was produce. That would pay me the most. Well, I got in produce I almost got fired from produce, actually. It's an interesting story. Okay, so I'm doing it for 1 month, and I'm sucking, man. I'm not getting the stuff done. And I had a general manager, the manager that was over me in the produce, and guys, you gotta understand, this is back in the 90s. So there was no such thing as being nice to your employees. This guy would walk up to me and say, Richard, you're the biggest F-ity FF I've ever seen. You suck at what you're doing. I don't know why you work here. You terrible. And then he would go to the next guy and do the same thing, and then go to the next guy and do the same thing. That's how he managed. So one day he walks up to me, he said, Richard, it was a Monday, he said, you got 1 week to get better or you're fired. And I said, you being serious? And I go, yeah. I go, being me. I go, do I really have a chance or have you already made up your mind? He goes, oh, you have a chance, but you're not going to do it. You suck. So, sorry, 1 week. So I was pretty devastated by that because I'd been really successful at most of my jobs up to that point, and I was really baffled by it. And so I went up to this guy, his name was Joey. We called him Joy Boy. Don't ask me why. But we called him Joy Boy. And I said, hey, Joy Boy. I go, Frank just told me he's going to fire me at the end of the week if I don't improve. And he goes, oh, yeah, man. He goes, I just don't get it. You know, I'm really trying. I'm really working hard. And he looked at me right now. He goes, oh, yeah, Richard. You know what, dude? You're the hardest worker we got here. He goes, look at you. You're just sweating right now, man. You're drenched. He goes, but you know what your problem is? You don't get nothing done. And I'm like, what? He goes, how long you been working that table? I said, 2 hours. And he goes, yeah, what, you got 5% of it done? I go, yeah. He goes, look at Rudy over there. Now, Rudy was this Hispanic guy who was, I'm not lying to you, 4'2". Okay? He had to have a milk crate that he dragged around to stand on to work the tables. He goes, but he said, look at Rudy. Rudy had apple boxes on both sides, and he would stick both hands in, and he'd pull out 6 apples. He'd rotate them in his hand, and back in those days, we stacked all the produce, and he lays them down on the table. And he said, Richard, you go like this, 1 apple at a time. So in 1 week, watching Rudy and watching Joy Boy, I learned how to do it. I kept my job. 6 months later, I was a produce manager.
Wow, that's
impressive.
If you're willing to take hard work, and hard work can be misguided, is the moral of the story, but you're willing to educate yourself and learn and add it to that hard work, then you will be exceptional. I wish I was your guys' age right now. I really do. Because there's so much opportunity out there in the world. So much opportunity that was not around when I started my career. I had to fight and scratch for everything I got. Right now, if I have an employee who shows up to work every day, they're like 90% better than the rest of them. Just by showing up. That's not even before they start work. Okay? I had employees, I should say. I had employees who would eat flaming hot Cheetos, dipping them in Cholula's salsa all day long, go to lunch, and not come back, and they would text me and say, I have a tummy ache for some reason, I need to go home. Okay? That's a true story. So, and that stuff happens. So it's an interesting world we're living in now as far as employment. But if you show up, if you apply yourself and work hard, right now the largest problem that's hurting American businesses is that the managers are retiring out. Okay? So typically the pathways you would start at an entry level, and then you would get into what's called middle management. Okay? Middleman management is not the best thing in the world. It's great for your career, but it doesn't pay that much more, and it's a lot more responsibility, and it takes a lot of time. But from middle management, you go to upper management, and that pays really, really well, and you have a little bit more freedom with your time. Okay? But the problem is young people see this, they start and they want to be right up here at the top, and they have to take that middle management role. Well, nobody wants it. You say, okay, I'm making $25 an hour, you're only going to pay me $28. That's not worth it. It's not worth my time and effort. You want me to work that hard for only $3 more an hour? I'm not going to do that. That's literally how they think. So the middle management roles aren't filled in most companies right now. They're being handled by the upper management. Okay, they're doing the work of the middle management. Well, that upper management's going away here. They're retiring out. So who replaces upper management? Middle management. So a lot of owners of companies are just saying, you know what, I'm going to sell my business and get out because I got nobody to run it anymore, which is kind of a shame. But there's those opportunities are out there, just people aren't taking them.
Yeah. And with management, what characteristics would you say makes a good manager?
That's a loaded question. Management skills, statistically speaking, it's been a long time since I looked this up, but there's only like 13% of the population that actually has natural management skills. Okay, So that's a pretty limited number of people that actually have a natural ability to manage people. You have a whole bunch of people, so that means that if there's only 13%, that means the rest are managed by people who aren't naturally talented to do it. So you can learn how to do it. I would say that I've learned how to manage people. I think the one talent that I've had that has set me apart and made me a successful manager is I'm fair. I look at every situation that comes my way, especially when it involves employees, is I need to do the right thing, the truthful thing, and the fair thing. So I have had tens of thousands of employees under me throughout my careers. If you went and talked to them and said, okay, tell me how it was working under Richard Herron, you would have some of them say I was their favorite boss they ever had. You'd have some say I was their least favorite. Okay, but you would overwhelmingly have them say I was the fairest person they ever worked for. They knew that if they went to me with a situation or a problem, that they would get a fair response. So good qualities for managers, first of all, you have to have the desire to do it. You have to be able to handle stress because management comes with stress. Okay, I have an ability to not let that stress overwhelm me and affect me in a negative way, although it has at times, depending on the situation. But you have to be able to manage the stress. If you can't manage stress, if it's going to mess up your health, management's not for you. You know, but stress, fairness, the ability to work hard, to be willing to put in the time. What do you do when you're the last person in a restaurant and it's 2 a.m. on a Saturday and you just worked a 14-hour shift and you're leaving and you realize that the bartender didn't throw out his bottle break? Do you walk away, go in your car and drive away and leave it for the opening manager to do? Or do you go and spend the next 30 minutes taking care of it? You spend the next 30 minutes taking care of it. You have a commitment to do the job, and so that's going to be convenient sometimes, and it's going to be awful inconvenient a lot of the time. You have to have that ability to have that commitment and keep it.
So then what characteristics or even personality traits do you think would hinder someone from management?
You know, there's all kinds of different personalities out there. There's a lot of different studies done on it. The one I believe in is that there's one I follow and found the most true is the one that believes that there's 7 different personality types. I believe that there's a core personality that affects the way you act. You can learn other personality traits, but you have a core one that's in there. So some of the personality traits that I think are, some of them are just, you guys probably have friends like this. A person who always says yes to every invitation, even if there's 5 on the same night, and then they decide whatever mood they're in to pick the one they want, and then they avoid the other people for a couple of days that they blew off, and then they sit there and act like it never happened. Okay? That kind of personality type, terrible managers. A manager that wants to please people, wants people to be their buddy and their friend, terrible managers, because they will make bad decisions throughout the day. You know, I remember one day at the restaurant, it was slow. So as a general manager, I said, you know what, I usually till the door opened, till the door closed, I was there. So it's 8 o'clock, we closed at 10, and I said, you know what, I got 4 managers still here, it's slow, I think I can go home early today. So I went to the 4 managers, gave them all, you know, make sure you do this, make sure you do that, all that, and I said, okay, and I'm leaving. So I get in my car, I get on the on-ramp, as I'm getting on the freeway, I say, I forgot my briefcase. So I get off the Knox on-ramp, get back on the freeway, come back. So I was gone for 12 minutes. One manager in the building, half the employees had been sent home, and they were struggling to help what happened to customers that were coming in because they cut so much. I was gone for 12 minutes. Think about that for a second. I told them all what they were supposed to do. They 100% disregarded what I said, and they all did their own thing. And all the employees, everybody was just waiting for Richard to walk out the door so they could do what they want to do. Those kind of managers, you just get rid of them. If they can't follow the instruction, I tell my managers, so I live here in Idaho, my business operates in Oregon and Washington, and I tell my managers, I ask them, before I promote them, I say, do you know what your job is if I put you in this management position? And they'll give me all kinds of answers. Well, to run pest control, to make sure all the plumbing goes well, blah, blah, blah. And I always say, no, your job is to be me because I can't be here. And they look at me, and some of them get it right away. Some of them don't ever get it, and those are the managers that don't usually work out. I've set up my business, I've put a core values in place, and if they don't understand what my core values are that has built the business, and they can't imitate those values, I can't have them be around because they're going to turn it in a different direction than I want the company to be.
So are those, I mean, for you, now that you've done this for so long, at the times that you've, done interviews and stuff, are these qualities that you can kind of see in people before, or?
That's a great question. Interviews are a lot of fun. Most people never get an interview with me because of what their resume says. And this is a point I want to bring up for young people like you. It is very common now for me to get resumes that show a 10-year working 10 years out of high school or 10 years out of college working, with them having 1 year at each company. I don't call those people. I used to. I used to look at their qualifications, and I would sit down and I would go through the list, and I would say, so you left, I would start at the very beginning. So this was your first job out of college? Yeah. Why did you leave? Well, I had a manager was a jerk and blah, blah. Okay, and then you went to this company, what happened there? I just didn't have the opportunity that I was hoping that I would get there. Oh, okay, well this one was too far from my house. I had a really bad commute. And I go through the whole list. And then I look at it and I pause. And I look up and I say, there's a, because by the way, every time they leave, it's for a different reason. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's not a commonality to it. And I say, you know what? I see one common thread in you leaving all these jobs. And I go, you know what that is? And they say, no, you. You're the commonality. Why would, if I hire you, why would it be different for me? And why would I get more than a year out of you? Well, because, I'm just hoping for the right situation. I go, you know what? There's no right situation. No job is perfect. No job is going to give you what you're looking for. You have to go to that job and you have to make it happen for yourself there. Now, there's a time to walk away. Trust me, there's a time to walk away from certain companies and certain jobs. But the truth is, the majority of people that quit, they quit for the wrong reasons. Right now, they say that an average employee will decide in the first 90 days if they're going to work for that company. 90 days. How can you know anything about a company in 90 days? I mean, really, you're at an entry level, you're doing the bottom of the totem pole work, and you're going to decide within 90 days. Here's the sad thing for the employer, is that doesn't mean that they leave in 90 days. That employee might hang out for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, never committed to the job. They decided 90 days into it that wasn't going to be their job. And so you get pathetic performance out of these people. So interviewing people, knowing what to interview, the best thing I can say about that is I am shocked how many people that I interview know nothing about my business. One of the first questions I goes, hey, what do you know about Crawl Pros? Oh, yeah, Crawl Pros. Yeah, you guys are like a great company, and you like crawl, and you're the pros at crawling. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, I mean, think about, I remember when I went to Smith's. I went to the library, because we didn't have internet back then, and I looked on microfiche for newspaper articles, and I learned about how they were in California at one time. Then they backed out of that market, and then they went over here, and now they're coming back, and they're going to invest $100 million to build 10 stores. So when the lady said, why do you want to work for Smith's? Like, well, Smith's is a great company. It was founded, and I went through the whole list, and she was like, who are you? I don't even know that stuff about the company, and I work for them. So it took me, a couple hours at the library? Well, that couple hours you could do in 10 minutes on your laptop and learn about the company, learn what they do, learn how long they've been established. When I have an employee, when I'm interviewing somebody and they actually, it's like, well, okay, what do you know about Crawl Pros? And why do you want to work for Crawl Pros? The worst thing you can say is, because I need a job. Although I would appreciate that honesty. I might be able to work with that. But if you're just like, well, like, man, like I'm hoping for a place that has growth and opportunity. Okay, so what does growth and opportunity look like to you? More money? Okay, well, what would you be willing to do, and for how much money is that worth? It's not a solid answer. If you can come in there and actually put some research and put some thought into what you want to do with the company, that's really important. And if I ask an employee, if I was to hire you, what would you bring to the table? They don't know how to answer that. My favorite thing that I used to say in interviews, it's a little trick I had. People would say, Richard, if you come to the company, what do you think you'd bring? And you go, I would always pause and I would go, that's a great question. I go, I always surprise myself. Every job that I've had, every person I work for, I always was surprised how much I was able to contribute, how much responsibility I was able to take on, how much I enjoyed working with my coworker. I'm always surprised by that. And you know what? I think if you hired me, you'll be surprised too. Man, it's like butter melting in their mouth, man. So, but I also meant it.
Yeah.
I wanted to surprise people. I wanted people to think that I'm kind of competitive. So, but yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as job applications, what looks good on a resume? Like, what should people be like? Certifications, for example, or like opportunities, internships. What should people be looking for?
That's a great question. That depends on what you're applying for. There's certain jobs that certifications are definitely needed for those jobs, sometimes required. So having those certifications are there. Job experience, I'm looking for longevity. I'm looking for a minimum. If I can find a person that had, even if they've jumped from job to job 1 year, 2 years, if they have a stretch where they had 5, 6, 8 years at a company, then when I interview them, I'm just focusing on that. Why that job? You're there for 8 years. Tell me about that job. Why did you leave? That's really important. But I'm looking for longevity. And if it's a person right out of college, the question I ask them is I say, what jobs did you have during college? And they won't put those down because they're just jobs they had during college. And if they say, well, I didn't work at all, my parents floated everything, I'm not so sure I'm going to hire them. But if they sit there and say, well, I worked as a server and then I worked here, you get a person that's doing like 3 gigs to get through college. I'm like, why'd you work all these jobs by going to college? And they're like, well, I didn't want to have debt. Oh, this is a person who's kind of thought about things, are willing to work a plan that they set up for their life. I think if they have a plan for my business where they want to go, they probably have a better chance of getting there. So I'm trying to find that. Interviews are really interesting. I conduct them a little bit different. By the time they get to me, and I don't do a lot of final interviews anymore, my managers do that. But if I do a final interview, by the time they get to me, they've already been asked all the questions. So I'll just sit down and say, tell me about yourself. Well, what do you mean? I go, well, start at the beginning. Where were you born? And just tell me I want to know who you are. And you'll be surprised if you let people talk, what they'll tell you, if they're comfortable, okay? I had a guy, had a resume, said he'd been in London for 2 years, lived in London. I said, you lived in London for 2 years? He goes, yeah, London. I go, that sounds kind of life-changing. What was that experience like? He goes, oh, it was great. It really accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish. I go, well, what were you trying to accomplish? He goes, well, I figured if I was ever going to kick the heroin habit, I had to get away from my friends and family and get into a new environment. Okay, it's a little alarming, but I can work with that. And I said, so my next question in my mouth was, well, how's that going for you? And his response always cracks me up to the day. He said, well, it's a hard monkey to get off your back. So I'm like, okay, so you're still having heroin problems. And I'm like, hey, thanks for coming in today. I wish you well with your heroin addiction. I hope you get that straightened out. You're not going to come work for my company and go into my customers' homes, but but you'd be surprised what people tell you. Be comfortable when you interview. Do whatever you have to do to be comfortable. Just remember, it's just a job interview. It's not life or death if you get it. There's always going to be an opportunity around the corner, and there's tons of opportunity out there right now. But if you can show on a resume that I look at volunteer work. If a person, I look at it for 2 reasons. If a person volunteers, I want to find out 2 things. Did they go pick up trash on a beach and they consider that to be volunteer work, or were they actually part of something where they were working on a regular basis? Like they were at a food bank and what'd you do at the food bank? Well, I was the guy who bagged up all the groceries and gave them out. How many bags did you bag up? Oh, we did about 150 bags a day. That's kind of a hard worker, right? Bagging up the groceries. I also want to see where their mindset is, because the last thing you want in an employee is a person who says, I want to know how your company gives back. Well, what do you mean give back? How do you give back? How do you pay back the people that made it happen for you? I mean, the people on the street, the customers? I pay them back every time I do an excellent job and give them a value for the dollars they spent. No, you're successful, so what are you doing to give back? Now, I am very, very conscious about charity. I think it's very important. I think it's a duty as a business owner and especially as a Christian. But an employee who never gave a dime to anything, but feels good because her company that she works for or he works for gives money back, that's not a person that's going to appreciate the things that they have with the company.
Yeah. So the appreciation is needed for the job, even no matter like with starting at like the base level,
Yep.
and it's like working your way up.
Absolutely, appreciation is everything. If I have employees that appreciate the job, wow. Let me give you an example. My high watermark for my company was in 2022. We did about $12.1 million in gross revenue. We were coming off the COVID high. So during COVID, a lot of people had to go home. They were looking around their house. They were noticing things that they never had time to notice. And home improvements went through the roof during that time. I knew that the COVID high was going to end in 2023. I also saw that interest rates were going up because part of the work that we do involves real estate transactions. I didn't feel there's going to be as many transactions, so I made a budget for 10 million. In 2023, we did 10.1, so right on track. Well, I didn't see the interest rates improving. I didn't see anything on the horizon. It was the last year of Joe Biden's presidency. In 2024, I didn't really, and also during election years, especially noisy election years, people tend to sit on their hands and not do work on their home because they're just distracted by all the political stuff going on. It doesn't matter what side of the party you're on, you're just distracted. So I budgeted for 10 million. Well, by May, I was on track to do about $2 million less. And that was concerning to me. That didn't make sense to me, okay? So I have a marketing company that I work with, actually two different companies, but the main one that I work with. I spend about $1 million a year with them, so I'm one of their larger clients. And so I was giving them a hard time because, I wasn't making a lot of appointments. I didn't feel the leads were coming in. So I kind of let my expectation be known. That's a nice way of saying I chewed him out in a nice way. So he comes back to me, does some research, and he comes back to me and he says, Richard, we've been doing marketing for you for 5 years now. And he said, if I take January through May of 2024 and I compare it to the years before that, I can tell you two things stood out. We brought you the most leads than we ever have in a 5-year period this year between January and May. And I can tell you, because he has access to my CRM system, that you schedule the least amount of appointments in that 5-year month period over the last 5 years. So those two don't make sense, okay? Highest amount of leads, lowest amount of scheduled appointments. So I had to start looking into things, and I had to start looking into my corporate office. I had to start looking into my employees there. And I started really discovering there was a lot of inconsistencies. In a nutshell, my corporate office, including the manager of the office, were working hard to not schedule appointments. So you might ask yourself, well, why would they do that? Well, I can't tell you what their motivations were, but I can tell you what I think they are. If they schedule an appointment, that would turn into more work for them, because then they'd have to take the time to write all the customer's information down. They'd have to figure out what estimator to send. If the estimator sells it, then they have to call the customer back, get them to sign the paperwork, collect down payments, schedule them, and when the job, then they have to schedule the employees to go do the job, and then they have to schedule the final payment. So it's just a lot easier to just not schedule those people. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So pure laziness. So we live in a society right now that's global. So I was depending on my employees for people who lived around Tacoma, Washington. That's where our corporate office was. I went in and terminated every employee I had in my corporate office, and I rehired those employees in the Philippines. The Filipino workers love the job, appreciate the job, work so hard every day to make sure that all the goals are being met. My estimators were doing 1-2 appointments a day. Within 3 weeks, they were doing 4 appointments a day. Okay? We finished off the year over 10 million, which we were on the track to do 8. We had in January, which is my slowest month of the year, in January in 2024, we did $640,000. Okay? January of 2025, we did $1.5 million. So here's the main lesson, here's the takeaway. I had to realize that, okay, I had a very successful business. What do I mean by that? We had a great reputation, okay? We had great employees, like our estimators were really good at selling work. Okay, our marketing was really good, it brought leads to us. The estimators could sell those leads. We had great installers who could perform the work, okay? All those systems were in place and working really well. We had a great reputation as a company. But we had one part of our company that was bringing it all down to the ground. One part, the office workers. And I think there's a lot of businesses out there that are successful businesses, good company, but they have a part in their business that's bringing everything down. And they don't deal with it for whatever reason. They don't realize it's happening for whatever reason. And the business closes because they didn't fix that one part of it. You have to look at your business. The lesson it taught me is I have to look at my business as whole and make sure every single spoke in that wheel is operating the way it should.
Yeah, so with like lessons learned, what is one lesson you've learned from a success with your experience? But also to make it interesting, what's one failure you've learned from?
Well, I think a big failure was I trusted my office manager to manage those employees, and I took more of a handoff approach to that. You probably hear people talk about all the time, it's like, you know, the problem with big business is they don't let people, you know, they keep them in a box, or you've heard the term micromanage. You know, I can't excel. I could really do great things for this company if I wasn't micromanaged. I didn't want to micromanage people, so I told them what the expectation was, and I trusted them to do it. Well, that trust backfired on me. So Ronald Reagan said, trust but verified. That's my big takeaway from the last year. You trust people, but you verify that they're doing what they're saying. Verifying takes a lot of work. You have to have systems in place to have checks and balances. So I've put into place several checks and balances now in our system so that I'm alerted right away if something doesn't go right. Well, there's a lot of work to do that. But yeah, that was a big failure. And another failure that I had is it can take years to build a relationship and just a moment to tear it down. You can have a great relationship with one of your employees, with one of your manager, and then you be a jerk one time, they'll never forget it. So you can't afford to do that. The other big lesson I learned was when I was working at Claim Number, we used to give, if it was your birthday, we give you half a piece of mud pie, which is an ice cream pie. Okay. So our ice cream pie came with Helen Grace hot fudge, whipped cream, nuts. But a birthday mud pie, you would cut in half, lay it sideways, and you just put Hershey syrup on it and whipped cream. So there was this guy who kept coming into my restaurant, and every time he came in like every week. He said it was his birthday, so he could get the free mud pie. And I was, that guy's cheating. So I wasn't just a regular manager at the time. I went to my general manager and I said, can I have permission to card this guy on table 56? Well, he thought I meant he was underage, and wanting to order alcohol. And he goes, well, yeah, if he's underage and he's ordering alcohol, go ahead and card him. I go, no. He's old. I go, I want to card him because he came in and said it's his birthday. And I know that he was in here the last couple of weeks and he said it was his birthday then. So I want to verify that it's really not his birthday. And my manager, Dennis White, one of my mentors, he looked at me and goes, huh, Richard? He goes, hey, can you go print me a copy of their check and bring it back to me? So I go pull the check, I give it to him. He looks at it, he goes, great. He goes, Hey, Rich, how much does a birthday mud pie cost? I'm like, I don't know. And he goes, well, go back in the recipe book and look it up and figure out what the cost is for me. Took me like 10 minutes to figure out it. So I come back and he goes, so how much is he told me to write it down on a card. So I wrote it down. It was 72 cents. So he goes, you have it? And I go, yeah. And I hand him the card. And he goes, okay. And he's got the receipt and he's got the card. And he goes, this check here says $89. He goes, this card says 72. So he goes, I got 89, 72 cents. Who won? And I looked at it and I was like, we won. He goes, of course we did. He says, so this is what I want you to do. He goes, I want you to go out there. I want you to give him your business card. I want you to tell him that anytime he comes into the restaurant, you'll give him a free dessert of his choice. Because we appreciate his patronage. I did not want to do that. You got to remember, guys, I'm like 24. I'm all about justice and righteousness. I'm like, it just seems so unfair. But I was told to do it, so I did it. That guy would come in twice a week because he knew me, and I would just get him sat right away too. He didn't have to wait very long. And he would bring in sometimes 2 people, sometimes 4 people, sometimes he was a party of 6, sometimes he was a party of 10. Because he liked to show off to his friends, though, he was the guy with the hookup. Hey, man, I can get in there, I can get his table right away, and I get a free piece of dessert, man. And our desserts were so big, you could share with the whole table. The company made tens of thousands of dollars off that guy for a dessert that cost us $2-3. So sometimes we get so focused in on business between, what's justice or what's right and at the end of the day, you just have to figure out, well, who's winning? Okay? If I run a company and my employees make good money, my installers, you probably heard that in the construction field, the hardest problem there is right now is to hire employees to do that work. Have you guys heard that at all? There's a big demand. I don't have any problem hiring installers. I always have installers when I need them. As my company grows, I'm able to fill those new, I'm able to put on new crews. In fact, I just bought 3 trucks yesterday. 3 new Isuzu trucks because I have 3 new crews I need to roll out, okay? The reason I don't have a problem is I pay them 40% more than my competitor does. So any installer that comes to work for me knows that they're gonna get 40% more money. And any employee that I have who just gets burned out and tired and quits knows they're gonna make 40% less. It is hugely motivating to them. I call that the win-win. My employees make more money. My customers pay more money. The average customer pays $1,000 more for our services than for a competitor. But they get $2,000 more in value from what we do. So the customer's happy and the company makes money. If everybody's winning, that's important. Here's a rule for management. You make your employees happy first because they'll make the customer happy. Most companies are focusing on customer happiness, not employee happiness. Okay? If the employee's happy, they'll make the customer happy because who's dealing with the customer? The employee. How do you make an employee happy? Well, that changes all the time. It's like a slide ruler, man. Sometimes I'm at a loss to what makes them happy, but you got to find the right people and make them happy, and hopefully they'll do a great job. They usually do. Another lesson I would say that's learned is when you make a decision to terminate an employee, you do not pass go, you do not collect $200, you do it immediately. Okay? You might think, okay, I need to keep them on for a couple of weeks because they're going to do this job and I need to have them finish this project. Or, you know what, Christmas is in a week and I don't want to fire them just before Christmas. That is always blown up in my face. So the second once I make that decision to fire him, I walk right up to him and say, it's been really nice working with you. I hope you have a good life. because it never, ever, ever works out to keep them on. They tear it down, and sometimes they take good employees with them. So that's another thing.
Yeah, this may be another loaded question, but as for if someone wanted to start their own business, let's say, what would you recommend is like first stepping, like what should the first steps they should take?
No, that's actually, I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who want to start their business, so I've answered that question quite a bit. So the first thing you want to do is save up 2 years worth of living expenses, because you're not going to be able to take any money out of your business the first 2 years. So most entrepreneurs who come to me, I say, how much money do you need to make this month? And they'll say, well, I need to make $4,000. So what happens when you quit your job and you start your business? Well, I'll get the $4,000 from business. I go, no, you won't. You don't know how much business you're going to have. You don't know if it's going to be busy or slow. You don't know what you can depend on. And you don't want to be focused in on that. And if you make $4,000 your first month you're in business, that $4,000 needs to be put back into your business. So save up 2 years of living expense. Some guys do it because their wife has a job and they're able to do it. But you can't count on an income, nor should you, for 2 years. And the great thing about that is if you start making income right away, you know what most entrepreneurs do? It's like, well, I saved up for the 2 years and I'm making this income. I'm going to go buy that boat that I wanted to buy. You're going to go out of business. That money needs to go back into the business. It needs to go into a reserve account so that when you have a slow month, you can pull from that money. So really important. That's the first thing we say. The second thing is, when I have entrepreneurs, when I meet with them, and the first question I ask them is, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Why do you want to own your own business? And 95% of the time I get the same answer, and it's, I want to have control over my schedule. And I say, that's great. I can take care of that for you. Go get a job. And they go, well, didn't you hear what I said, Richard? I want to have control over my schedule. And I said, I did hear what you said. Go get a job. And they said, well, that doesn't make sense because then my boss tells me what to work. I go, no. Between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. the next morning, you have complete control over your time. But if you have a job, that's a job does that. But if you have a business, your customers and your employees dictate the hours you work. Okay? Now you're probably asking yourself, what do you mean the employees dictate what I work? Because what happens when an employee doesn't show up? Who does that job? I do. What happens when an employee screws something up and I have to go fix it? Who has to spend the time to fix it? Me. So you're not going to have control of your time. When I was I'm going to be 55 in May. When I was 48, I decided to add up how many hours I worked over 40 hours in my life. And I figured out that I worked an extra 13 years. Does that sound appealing to you?
I mean, it definitely sounds like a lot of, obviously, extra work, but I think thinking of it from just straight an extra 13 years, obviously that's never going to sound like, if you walk up to someone and just say, hey, you want to work an extra 13 years of your life on top of what you're already doing? Obviously it doesn't sound appealing, but I think if you can gain added success from that, which is, sure, you can't necessarily predict success, but I think if you have a better mindset and you look at it as the opportunity that 13 years can give you, I think it takes motivation for sure, but I think it can be very good.
One of my superpowers that I would consider a superpower is, no matter how bad the day was, no matter how many things went wrong, when I would go home, my wife would ask me how the day went, I would tell her about a positive thing that happened. I would say, yeah, it was great. I had time to go have lunch at Hop Scene Chinese restaurant, my favorite Chinese restaurant. I don't usually get time, and they had this great Mongolian beef special, and it was only $4.95. Can you believe it? I got a whole meal for $4.95. I didn't tell her that I had to crawl through sewage in a crawl space just before that. I didn't tell her that I had to wash myself with soap and paper towels in their Hobson's bathroom. Why would I? Why would I think about that? I'd rather think about the Mongolian beef. You understand what I'm saying? You have to figure out what you want. So if you do that, the stress doesn't wear on you as much. I've been times when I've been absolutely exhausted, physically exhausted from what I've done, mentally exhausted. But think about the positive things that you do. Okay? Everybody says to you, which is a lie. Let me repeat this. This is a lie. Okay? Everybody says, find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Have you heard that? Okay?
All the time.
Guiding counselors talk about that. It is a bunch of crap. Okay? I'm a religious person. It says in Genesis, when mankind sinned, a woman was cursed, right? The snake was cursed, the woman was cursed, man was cursed. Okay? There was a fourth curse. The earth was cursed. Okay? So a snake had to be knocked down and crawl on its belly. Do snakes still crawl on their belly? Okay. A woman was cursed with pain in childbearing, and her desire would be unto her husband. Do women still have pain in childbearing? Right? What was the man's curse? You guys went to Christian school. Do you remember what the man's curse was?
Like hard work and labor. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
basically harder life. Like kind of.
So before that, the man walked around, picked fruit, ate it, didn't have to work for it. Okay. After that, it said, it's kind of interesting. He said, by the sweat of his brow, so that indicates physical activity. Yeah. By the sweat of his brow, he will work day and night to produce food. And it says, from dust he came, so that's the beginning of his life, till dust he returns. So it says, from the beginning of his time till the time he dies, he's going to have to work by the sweat of his brow. How many people talk about retirement? That's what everybody wants, right? I want to have an early retirement. We want to try to avoid that curse. But it's a curse. We don't get to avoid it. Also, it says that the ground was cursed with thorns and thistles. Okay? So what that's saying is he's going to have to toil with the earth to grow food, but he's also going to have to fight with thorns and thistles. So it's going to be difficult work. Okay? I believe work is a gift. I believe it is one of the most rewarding things we will do as a man, is to work and provide for a family. So I'm not saying it's a curse. What's a curse is how hard it is. And we're all chasing this thing thinking, you know, I want to work for 10 years and not work anymore. Or I only want to work for 4 hours a day. Or I only want to do easy work. Those are not what that's not the bargain that God gave us. Okay? So when you talk to those guys who try that, you will always find them frustrated, pissed off, because guess what? It doesn't work out that way. You might have those one or two guys that one-off, a person who's an influencer. You know how hard a person has to work to be an influencer nowadays? How much work goes into their production of all that? They're working their tail off, man. And you know what? They might be relevant today and unrelevant tomorrow. So there's really, maybe a person scratches a lottery ticket and wins money. Do you know that the average lottery winner is broke within 2 years after winning the lottery? Okay? Nobody escapes the curse. So embrace the curse. What I found is if you pick a job, you don't have to love it. You pick a job that has a lot of opportunity, you apply yourself to it, you work hard, and you know what you're going to discover? That you became an expert at it. And you know what happens when you become an expert at something? You become passionate about it. The passion comes through the dedication and the work. Do you think that when I was in high school and my guidance counselor asked me what I wanted to do, I said, I want to crawl through rat feces and crawl spaces and put up insulation in a 3-foot space. Okay? I never thought that. I never even wanted this job. I invested in a business with 2 guys, ended up owning the business. I was just trying to get my money back out of it. But I worked and applied myself, and all of a sudden one day, I had a phone. I just got off the phone with an architect asking me questions about how to insulate a vaulted ceiling. I'd had a phone call before that architect from a building inspector in Bellevue asking me a question about their own code. Okay? And I'd had a phone call before that from from a contractor wanting to know how to do something. And I pulled my car off the road and I said, why are these people calling me, asking me all these questions? I'm just Richard Herron. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm an expert at insulation. And I literally said to myself, how did that happen? I wasn't trying. I didn't go to college to become an expert at insulation. It's because I applied myself. I worked hard. I educated myself. I became passionate about it. And when those things all go together, you become an expert. I get invited to really nice trips. I've stayed at a lodge in Montana that's $3,000 a night. Okay, all that was put on by Knopf Insulation. I've done fishing trips down in Baja, Mexico, in beautiful resorts. I've done pheasant hunting in Colorado and North and South Dakota. I've been to luxury hotels, all sponsored by manufacturers of insulation. And I look around the room and I'm like sitting next to a guy who does $300 million in purchases, you know, in sales, and this guy over there. And one day I walked up to the guy who was sponsoring and I said, why am I here? I mean, my measly little couple of $1 million that my business does, why am I here? And they said, well, Richard, these guys all represent new construction, and new construction is a big business. But you are number one for retrofit insulation. And that market is 70 times larger than the permitted new construction work. There's just nobody going after it. So I have a seat at the table because I'm top in my field, small field. So I will give you guys this for free. Take it for what you will, okay? If a person came to me and said they wanted to be an entrepreneur, I would give them four criteria to doing that, for picking a business. And it doesn't matter what business it is, as long as it fits into these four criteria. The first criteria is it has to be a business that can't be exported, okay? If you're manufacturing something and it becomes really popular and you're making money at it, China's going to knock it off for cheaper and put you out of business, okay? So the first criteria is you have to produce something that cannot be exported. That's why I work in existing homes. Those homes are here and they're not going anywhere. So that checks the box for number one. Number two, you want to produce something that a person decides to purchase because they have to, not because they want to. Okay? What medications do you think are the most expensive medications that pharmaceutical companies sell?
Like life-saving.
Yeah.
Kind of,
And why do people pay it?
because
They need it.
Because they have to. Okay? So, my business, I clean out crawl spaces and attics that have mold, water, rodent infestation. Okay? If you find out that you have 10,000 rats living under your house, do you just let that stay? If you have mold through your crawl space and attic, do you not deal with that? Do you want to spend the money on some place you never go into or ever see? Of course not, but you have to. Okay, so first one, it can't be exported. Second one, the customer has to do it, doesn't want to. I could go sell carpet. Person could say, yeah, that's great carpet, but why did they buy it? They don't have to buy it. Their carpet's fine, might not look good. Okay, so those are the second one. The third one was I wanted to pick something that didn't have a lot of competition. Okay, so when you think about it, why are there so many restaurants out there? There's restaurants in every corner. Why do so many people become restaurateurs? It's because it's fun. Oh, I get to have my friends come over. I get to buy them a meal. I get to do this and that. I get to eat food every day for free, blah, 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 blah. It's fun, okay? But there's a million restaurants. So pick something that a lot of people don't want to do. Well, let me tell you, a lot of people don't want to crawl in crawl spaces, okay? I picked that field because it hit the first two, but the third one is I don't have a lot of competition. Okay, so that's rule number 3. And then the fourth one, which is the most important one, is you have to be able to do it well. So if you identify a business that meets the first 3 criteria, but you would never be able to do it well, don't get involved in it. But if you find something that can't be exported, needs to be done, nobody wants to do it, and you do it well, why wouldn't you be successful?
that
Right, yeah.
makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think
So I started out doing crawl spaces, and then in 2020, I went into pest control. There's 1 million pest control companies out there, okay? Will it be exported? No. Do people have to do it? Yes. It didn't hit the third box. The fourth one is, can we do it well? Yes. But it didn't hit the third box. We've been struggling with that for 5 years now because it didn't hit that third box. I'm trying to advertise in a very noisy environment. There's a lot of competition. The good news is my crawl space division feeds work from that naturally in the Pest Pros. So if I did not have that, I would never have taken on that because it didn't hit the third criteria. We have a division called Plumbing Pros now. Okay, we just started that this year. We're full service plumbing in a home. First one meets, second one meets. You know, if your toilet's backing up on you, you kind of got to get it fixed. Third one, there's 1 million plumbers out there. Okay. Fourth one, can we do it well? Well, we're trying. We're going to find out. I think we will. But the reason I do it is we come across a lot of plumbing leaks when we're in crawl spaces, and we come across a lot of cast iron pipes that need to be redone. So we're pushing that business. So I'm by-stepping the third category because it's being fed through the first category. Make sense? We're rolling out in May, we're rolling out duct cleaning. So we already sealed the duct work. We already wrapped the duct work with insulation. Now we're gonna seal it. It meets, there's not a lot of duct cleaning guys out there. So this one I think will be successful a lot sooner, but we'll feed it through there. So I'm also trying to decide whether or not I want to do electrical work. I've been considering bringing on an electrical contractor because we come across knob and tube wiring in old homes, all stuff that can be fed from the first. So when I started Crawl Pros, I was just looking for those four boxes to be hit, but now I'm realizing that even though I'm not hitting the third box with these other businesses, because I've established such a strong brand in the first, that I can feed work to it. All that is additional revenue streams. It's additional opportunity for profitability. Another thing I ask prospective entrepreneurs is, how much money do they want to make? What's their end goal? How much money do they want to make on an annual basis? And most of them don't have an answer for me. If you're going to start a business, you're going to go through all the stress, take on all the liability, take on the risk, take on managing employees and dealing with customers. There should be a reward at the end of that, and it should be a nice number. Because otherwise, you know, a lot of them will say $100,000 or $150,000. There's a lot of jobs that will pay you that without all the stress.
So if there was, you mentioned how save up 2 years worth of spending if you want to start a business.
You should, yeah.
Yeah. In what ways would you advise people wanting to save up? Like, what would be best?
Oh, that's simple. Live below your means. You have to budget. So if you're making $3,000 a month, you need to learn to live on $2,000. And then you need to look at it and say, okay, so I need $3,000. I'm saving, $1,000 a month. How many years is it going to take me to get to the place where I can roll out my own business? So you budget and you do the math. Let me tell you something about financial budgets. They're hard, okay? When my wife I worked when she was going to college, and when she got out of college, I was supposed to go back to college. And I was making really good money at a restaurant at the time, and so I said, you know what, I'm just going to stay. Probably should have went back to college. I'm not complaining where my life ended up, but there would have been some benefits to that, but that's a different subject. But I didn't. And we just spent on credit cards like crazy. We got super in debt. Like, we were young, and I think we were like $12,000 in debt, which just seemed... So we set a budget. And we had a section of that for entertainment, like if I wanted to go get a coffee bean, or if we wanted to go to In-N-Out, we had a separate budget for that. We used that up in 2 days. When the first month we rolled out the budget. So we couldn't do nothing for the rest of the day, but we didn't. We didn't break it. We kept the budget. And then within a year, that same dollar amount didn't change, but we were having access roll over every month. Follow what I'm saying? So then we started looking at it, and we started seeing other ways that we could solve and how we could entertain ourselves. before we would go out to eat and then go to a movie. Now we would find that there was lots of free things like, bands meeting in the park, and we found these free entertainments that we could go to. And we literally made picnic lunches for ourselves, that was really cheap to make, and then we would go with our lawn chairs, and it's actually a lot better than most of the movies that we would see, and the food was actually better than a lot of the restaurants we ate in, but we learned to live below that budget and live below our means. And then you'd be surprised how much you can shave off and shave off and shave off. But I would say it's important, if you're not gonna go out to restaurants, you need to find a different alternative for that, okay? We're gonna go on a picnic. You need to not, everybody thinks they're gonna go without. This is an important concept. Don't go without, replace. Replace what you're spending money on with free activities, and they're always out there. Even if it's just meeting up with some friends, playing some basketball. It's a free activity. You follow what I'm saying? Because if you don't do that and you just sit at home and stare at the wall, you're not gonna be able to do the budget. So budget's important. Research into what you wanna do, figuring out what business you want. And for me, it was those 4 criteria. It might be something different for somebody else. And really evaluating how successful can that be. My wife wants to do a retail store, okay? She's always wanted to. She wants to have a place called This and That. So it's a place where you go in and there'd be women's clothes and there'd be gifts that you could give people and candles. And she just has this great idea. And I'm like, that's a great idea, honey. I bet you'd have a great store. I go, so are you willing to stay there 7 days a week? And what do you mean? I go, well, it's retail. So you're open at 10, you close at say 8, that's 7 days a week. Well, I'm gonna have people work it. I'm like, okay, so you're gonna be able to hire people that will sit there for all those hours. How much merchandise are you gonna have to move to just pay for those, besides the rent on the building and the utilities and the merchandise that you buy, how much money are you gonna have to earn to do that? I mean, if you sell a candle for 40 bucks, how many candles do you have to sell? Okay, a lot of people, this is gonna surprise you, a lot of people jump into a business and don't even know what they have to do to pay the bills. They don't know how much merchandise they have to sell, how much product they have to do. They haven't considered that. So you need to research and consider every aspect of it. And you need to figure out, okay, if I'm gonna do this business and make a living out of it, and then not just make a living, make profit and money on top of my living, how much do I have to sell in a month to do that? To cover my costs, how much more do I have to do? And then you have to ask yourself the hard question. If I have this little shop in Eagle, Idaho, am I gonna be able to sell 2,000 candles a month? Probably not.
Right.
Yeah.
You see these businesses open up all the time, and then a year later they're closed, right? Mm-hmm. They're gone, and somebody else is there who thinks they're gonna do the same thing. Restaurants close all the time. Restaurants is like, they say that 8 out of 10 restaurants will be closed in the first 2 years. Do you know how much money? I mean, you can spend, there's a brand new restaurant that's here in Eagle that Barbecue will open. They spent $11 million on that building that they did. How many years will they have to operate before they recuperate that $11 million? They probably have that figured out. They're a successful restaurateur. They probably know exactly where their break-even point is, where the money is. And so you have to evaluate the risk and the cost. And you have to have a realistic, hard look at that. And most people just, well, that's boring. It's boring to do all that research.
Yeah.
The devil's in the details.
That is true. Yeah, it is really important. Kind of learned this with Devin and I when we've been trying to make a plan of like, okay, how are we gonna reach out to interview these people? At first it seems like, oh, it's easy. We just contact them, bada bing, bada boom, set up the interview. There's so much intricacies, like just scheduling this. Like we've spent hours calling and just figuring out everything. And so your point, I mean, it holds true just by experience alone. It's like you need to figure out the details before you have a plan. And go.
How do you get past the gatekeepers? Most business owners, the people around the company, you can't get a hold of them. You can't talk to them. They have layers of people that you have to go through. So when I want to meet with a person that's important, I do research on them, find out what they're passionate about. And I use that passion to get through. So if John Mansfield is one of the companies I order insulation from, and I wanted to talk with their VP of sales. Found out he was passionate about trout fishing, fly fishing. I got to him through that. So something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to bring this up. Devin mentioned when we first met you. You said it to me as well. We met Richard Herron at a movie theater. We watched a movie. It just happened to be there at the same time. And he reached out his hand. We shook his hand. And after we shook his hand, as he went to go to his seat, looked to me and Devin and said, "You two need to work on your handshake." And you explained this to us before we started the interview, but I think it would be valuable if you explained to the audience why a handshake is so important.
So first impressions, everybody's heard how important they are, and that really is a true thing. I've had some bad first impressions with people, and it took me years to get them on my side. So when you shake another man's hand, if it's a wimpy handshake, it's not very strong, your mind will mentally feel that that's a weak person. It can't help it, because touch is one of our most important senses that we have, okay? So you can't help but feel that way, and it could take you years to convince me otherwise, okay? So when you shake a man's hand, you want to put your hand out, you want to put it in an open position, not this. If I go to shake somebody's hand and they come at me upward, that means they're trying to take dominance over me, okay? So I always go in straight when I talk to somebody, and I'm okay. If they want to go open, then I'll come over the top. If they're coming over strong on the top, I'll let them do it, but I'm going to squeeze their hand a little tighter when it's done. So I let them have the dominance, but I've also showed them that I'm a force to be reckoned with. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm willing to compete. I'm willing to fight. You understand what I'm saying? Depending on who the person is, if Donald Trump was in the room, I would not squeeze his hand. I would come in dominant, because he's a usually successful person and he's earned my respect. And that's a way I can show respect to that person. If you're doing a job interview, you better come in this way. But you better give a nice, firm handshake. Don't hurt their hand. But it shows that you have confidence. Stand up straight. Look the person in the eye while you're shaking their hand. Okay? It's important. It's first impressions. So many men don't know how to shake hands. It's unfortunate. I feel bad for you guys. I think a lot of young men don't get the training that they need to be successful. In life, you will have conflict. That's just a given. And you have to be able to deal with conflict, and you have to deal with it in a way that you can be successful and win. Okay? Controversial, what I'm going to say. I believe every young man should get into a fist fight in their life. Okay? I believe this. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't want anybody to get bullied. But let me tell you what happens when you're a young man, you get in a fist fight. You learn so many valuable lessons. Okay? First lesson you learn is it hurt, but you survived. Okay? That hurt, but I survived. Now, of course, fights can get out of hand. People can get seriously injured. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when I went to school and I was arguing with one of my classmates, my teacher would say, "You boys go settle that out on the playground." And we would do that. Okay? We would go out there and wrestle around and fight each other. You know, but you learn that it's not that bad, you survive it. More importantly, you learn, maybe I should have kept my mouth shut. Maybe that wasn't the smartest thing that I did. Sometimes you learn that, man, I underestimated that guy. That guy kicked my rear, man. I didn't see that coming. I better be careful when I'm sizing people up, because you never know. Sometimes you're victorious and you realize, you know what, I got out of hand there. I was a little bit cruel to that person. I can't be that. That's what's inside of me that made me kick them when they were down. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, there's other ways to learn these lessons, but they're lessons that need to be learned. We need to learn how to work with other people. We need to learn to be able to talk. I mean, men used to go shoulder to shoulder with life. I don't know that men do that much anymore. Most men are lucky if they have one friend at that. You're going to need men to lean upon. Especially if you're in a career, you're going to need other entrepreneurs. I have a whole network of other entrepreneurs that I call, I meet with, I have dinner with, and I call it we chew the same dirt. You know, They have similar experiences, and I find myself the most comfortable with those people now because they're going through some of the similar things that I'm going through. And I sometimes will have a problem and they say, oh yeah, I had that problem, this is how I fixed it. Man, that saves me so much time if you can just give me the answer instead of me trying to figure out how to fix it, and vice versa. So you need to make those connections. And if you find a friend, keep that friend. Do what you need to. Go out of your way to spend time with them. Because let me tell you guys, it's rare. You guys are friends. What you have, if you're still friends at 50, that would be rare. Okay? But that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be one of the most important friendships that you could have. But you have to work at it. Nobody wants to work anymore.
For connections, how would you recommend reaching out to people and networking?
Networking is an interesting thing. I like to do it through people's interests, through their likes. I try to find out what makes them tick, and I try to approach them on that way. So I don't care for sports. So when I worked at Claim Jumper, I read the sports page every day. And I would look at the scores for the local teams, okay? And I would read, kind of skim through and read the high point, okay? So when I was standing at the window working with another manager, I'd look over and go, hey man, did you catch that Angels game last night? Oh yeah. I go, can you believe that he let that hit come up in the 8th inning and then they lost the game? Yeah, that sucked. And then they would talk for 10 minutes about stuff I had no idea what they were talking about. But I knew enough to have the conversation. So learning a lot about a lot of things and a lot of different interests is very valuable to store that information. I had a boss one time who we were doing a check of the cleanliness of the restaurant. So we started at 3 a.m. and you work all night through there. And it was about 8 a.m. and we're just talking. And he had a flashlight to inspect. And he shined the flashlight right in my eyes. And he said, Richard, you're a virtual well source of useless information. Because I could talk about so many different things. I don't know a lot about them, but I know enough to keep the conversation going. So that's how you make connections through interests. You have to have something to connect with the person, to relate to them, and let them talk. When was the last time somebody actually asked you what you were interested in and wanted to hear it?
It's been a while. Yeah, that's not a question I get that much.
Okay, well, if somebody does do that, you'll walk away from that conversation and say, man, that guy's a great guy. All because they just asked you. We're so self-focused right now. Every person is out for themselves. And we've been taught that, okay? We've been taught that through the TV shows we watch, from the movies we watch, through the commercials on TV. Because if you're self-focused, you'll buy a Yeti mug because it's the best. And I deserve the best, right? Okay? If you take the time to talk to people and let them talk, they will talk. And they will talk. But you have to be sincere about it. There's not a trick I can teach you that this is how you act. You have to actually be interested in people. And you know what? We all should be, because guess what? People are interesting. I learn something from every conversation I have with people. Every single one of them. I learn something. And I usually find out that people are pretty neat. Even when people do stupid things, like the guy I met who had the heroin addiction, I actually had lunch with him after that. It was for a restaurant job as a server. And I got to talk to the guy about his addiction. I got to talk to him about his problem. Would I hire him? Not a chance. But was I able to connect with this person and learn something? I learned a lot about heroin. I learned a lot about London. Okay? Stuff that actually later on, I had an employee that when I was working in my company now, he got arrested for doing a drug deal in my car, company car. So here's cops handcuffing him, hauling him off to jail, and leaving the Crawl Pros car there in impound. Okay? But I was able to get him in. I knew enough from that heroin discussion to know that there's a Narcotics Anonymous. I was able to find him a local group. I didn't fire him. Should have, but I didn't. I went and got him into this. I went to the first 3 meetings to make sure he showed up. He turned his life around over the next 2 years. He got married, he had a kid, and then he quit, which sucked because he went back to college. He got his life cleaned up, so he went back to college to do that. I'm like, why are you going back to college? You're making like $100,000 a year for me. He's like, well, you know, I wanted to do this, but then I got addicted to drugs and I dropped out of college and I just really feel like I need to do this. I'm like, okay, so I help you out and then I make it so I was actually kind of happy for him, although I don't think that when he's done with college, I didn't follow up with him. I don't think he's going to make what he made with me. But you understand my point? From that conversation, I was able to use it for this conversation. So ask people. Find out what they're interested in and ask them questions about that. And that's how you connect. And then circle back around. Okay, that's really important. So if you make a connection with somebody, you have a good conversation, give a little time, and then reach out to them. It could be through a text. Hey, how you doing, man? I was just thinking about you. I remember when we talked, you said this, and I saw this here. Take a picture of it. I thought you might find this funny. Don't do it too much, but circle back around, circle back around. And if you have an opportunity to go to some function that they're going to be at, go to it. Especially if they're, my connections, I'm going to tell you, man, there was times in my business where I was in bad financial shape or I got cut off from a supplier, and because I had made connections with other people, I was able to reach out to them and get help. And it's super important. Thank God for that, those people in my life that I was able to connect with and help.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, as we kind of wrap up this interview, we came up with one final question. So out of this whole conversation that we've had, what do you think is the one key takeaway that if someone were listening that they should take away from this entire conversation?
There's no one key answer. That will be my answer. You have to hit on all thrusters. All engines have to run. If you think that you're going to be able to be successful just doing one thing, it's probably not going to happen. You have to always be well-rounded completely to be successful.
Makes sense.
And by the way, when you're successful, the money ain't bad either.
Right.
Perks of being successful.
Yeah, I never, ever, every job I had and every business that I've had, I never did it for the money. I never thought about the money. I can honestly say that. I mean, I knew that what the potential was, and I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think that potential was there. That's important for me to say. But while I was doing it, I wasn't focusing on the money. I was focusing on doing the best job that I could, creating the best product that I could, creating the highest customer satisfaction. Because I knew if I focused in on that, the money would come. And I will say that that happened to me. As I focused in on those things, the money just was a byproduct of it.
Yeah, so don't focus on the money, focus on perfecting the job.
Yeah, if you focus, I've known a lot of entrepreneurs who focus on the money and they're never successful. They will not make it. They might have moments when they have money, but then they make bad decisions. Okay, it's, if I find a business going out of business and I want to buy a BMW or a boat, I know that I can go to that owner or that company I just went out of business because he's probably got those. And I probably get a really good deal on it.
Wow. Well, I think we've definitely learned, like even just here in the space, I think we've learned quite a lot from like the 4 points you gave us and a bunch of different, all these questions I think have, even just for this podcast, I think have given us a way to further improve what we're doing here as well as for our audience.
Awesome.
And so I think just wrapping this up, on behalf of like all of us here at Leaders Unplugged, Jackson, we have Andrew in the back, our man in the chair. My name's Devin. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to not only help us, because we're just getting started, but helping everyone here watching, everyone who's going to be coming by as we get things going. Do you have any last things you want to?
Maybe, you usually want to leave on a high note, but let me leave on a little bit of a down note. If you build something worth having, there will always be somebody who wants to take it from you. And that's just a word to the wise. If you become successful, there's going to be people that's going to try to take it. I found that to be very true, not just in my life, but in other entrepreneurs, friends that I know. So keep that in mind.
All right.
Right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And we hope to be back soon with a lot of other really incredible people. We'll be back filming more stuff here in the coming weeks, coming months. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And until next time, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.